Welcome to the Atheist in Recovery podcast, where we talk about finding hope in recovery. And now your host, Dr. Adina Silvestri.
Hola, Atheists in Recovery, and welcome to episode 101 of the Atheists in Recovery podcast. And today we have Arlina Allen on the show, and I'm excited to have this guest on. She was very fun, very personable, and there was a lot of laughing, even though it was a very serious topic. And so we talked a lot about Arlina's early years of trauma, her poor attachment with her mother, and parental divorce that really were the catalysts to leading to feeling like she was not worthy. She shared she didn't know how bad her self-worth was until she found happiness at the bottom of a bottle. She kept hold of these narratives, two of which were if she could just make more money or fall in love, then that would save her. She eventually, as she likes to call it, lived her way into right thinking. And I bring this up because I know that all of us struggle with these limited negative self-beliefs. And this episode has a chock full of tools, a little science thrown in there. But at the end, Arlina shares a writing exercise with us to address these limiting beliefs, and I think you're going to like it. All right, on to our guest. Arlina Allen is a life and recovery coach, the founder of Sober Life School, and the host of the award-winning recovery podcast, the One Day at a Time podcast. She's been sober since April 23rd of 1994, married for 24 years, and mother of two amazing boys. Her class, Reinvent How to Rebuild Self-Esteem and End Self-Sabotage, is being taught to those who suffer from low self-esteem, codependency, workaholism, and many other issues. Okay, guys, on to the show. Arlina Allen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I am excited for you to be here. And I thought we could start our conversation by exploring your deepest roots from childhood. Just jumping right in.
Wow, you're going in the deep end right away. Okay. So I grew up in Sunnyvale, California, in the Silicon Valley area. My parents are very nice people. Daddy was from Kentucky, so occasionally I will lapse into a Southern drawl for no apparent reason. I come from a long line of ministers, oddly enough, so that's always fun. And my mother is from Mexico City. She was the first foreign exchange student in Klamath Falls, Oregon, many years ago. And she's, people from that area are very Catholic. So it's to say that I grew up super churched is somewhat of an understatement.
Funny.
Yeah. I have an older sister with some mental illness issues, but she's also a very nice person. I didn't grow up with any kind of addiction in my family. I did experience trauma when I was very young. I was abused by a neighbor when I was about 5. From the age about 5, went on for a couple of years. And then my parents divorced. And so the combination of those two things really altered how I felt about myself, about the world, and kind of set the stage for some pretty intense dysfunction later on. I learned some survival skills that did not translate into healthy adult relationships. So at a very young age, I discovered alcohol. I was about 8 or 9, I would say. My mom was out on a date and she went out to dinner, and I have an older sister. She and I were left home alone. And I thought it'd be a great idea to drink some of the alcohol that was in the cabinet. And I remember the alcohol burning my lips. I remember it burning all the way down. And then when it hit bottom, the warmth that spread through my body and all the self-consciousness, self-loathing, all the negative feelings that I felt towards myself was lifted. And the juxtaposition of those two feelings seared in my memory forever, that alcohol would take away all those bad feelings, right? And obviously I didn't become a daily drinker at age 9, but it was sort of like the beginning of learning how to disassociate and detach and suppress my feelings. So that's kind of like the childhood experiences. And that's kind of how the stage was set for many years of, mental health issues and dysfunctions and addictions and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you discovered alcohol at age 8 or 9, and that just really stuck with you that, well, I don't really I feel like myself again, or like I feel like maybe everyone else feels, or yeah, like what was that feeling?
Yeah, it was the removal of it. I didn't actually realize how bad I felt until I felt good,
Mm,
right? I felt really good, like the self-conscious. I didn't realize how much self-loathing I had had. I had already made decisions about myself. Like when my father left, he was the nurturing one of my two parents. My mom had like two feelings. She was either really happy or really angry. And I felt like she saved the happy face for the outside world. Right. And so I translated that into there must be something wrong with me, and seeking her approval in achievement and variety of ways, mostly trying to save my sister. That
mhm.
was the goal, save the sister, which I failed at. And I mean, she didn't die, but she never was healed, so to speak. So
Mm,
that it was the feeling is I just felt good. Like all the negativity was, I had got that relief from the alcohol.
yeah.
And so it was that relief I was always seeking.
Hmm. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So maybe you could tell us now a little bit more about your recovery journey. Yeah.
Sure. So from the first drink to my last, I kind of sum it up like I had this funny tagline I used to talk about all the time. And I still do. But if it were in a bottle, a bag, or blue jeans, I was doing it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I would use,
That's a good
you know what I'm
tagline.
saying? Because I used, drugs, alcohol, and men to change the way I felt. Definitely fall into the love addiction camp where I thought love was going to save me. I actually thought money or love was going to save me. I
Yeah.
gave up on God a long time ago because I had been begging God to change me and fix me since I can remember. And lo and behold, I was never fixed or struck perfect. I'm not exactly sure what I was hoping for,
Hmm.
but I kept ending up in this place where I felt like I hated myself and I felt like this higher power thing failed me.
Hmm.
And so I was like, well, if I can't be good, then I'm going to be good at being bad. And I just pursued this idea that it was money or love that was going to save me. And oddly enough, it was love that saved me, but it didn't show up the way I thought it would. I had
Not in
totally
blue jeans, huh?
not in blue jeans,
Yeah.
no. As it turns out, it was love that saved me, but it came through the women of a 12-step program.
Mm.
And oddly enough, it was a couple of men who introduced me into the 12-step program. And the thing is I wanted to quit and I just couldn't. I was smoking a lot of weed. If I was awake, I was high.
Hmm.
Funny story, the pastor's daughter at this Southern Baptist church that I was going to, she told me one time we were smoking weed. She told me one time that she was high so often that not being high was her altered reality. And I was like, oh my God, you are my
Wow.
hero. Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to be just like you. And I kind of was. But truth be told, I was pursuing this sales career and I wanted to be sober. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to make a lot of money. I thought that was going to save me.
Hmm.
I thought that was going to fix everything. If I could just fall in love and have a lot of money, my life would be perfect. So I was trying to quit smoking and I just couldn't. Right. I realized that the alcohol was a problem too, but I just couldn't. And these two guys that were customers of mine, they didn't drink, and we would go out to lunch and they'd order iced tea or soda or something. And we got to talking and telling stories. And they were both in the program, the 12-step program. And so they sort of started breaking down some concepts
Hmm.
that I could absorb. Like it was just like cause and effect. It was like science based. It was like practical. I needed practical advice because I lived in the self help section at Barnes and Noble. I was trying I read every self-help book that you can, and none of it was working. What I know now is that I was trying to think my way into right living.
Mm.
And turns out you kind of need to live your way into right thinking. As you live right, your brain begins to heal and rewire, and you're able to make better decisions. And so nowadays I'm obsessed with like neuroscience and how the brain works as it relates to recovery, because there's some very practical, basic science-based thing. Like, you don't need to have faith if we have science. It's kind of been my mantra as of late. I'm kind of obsessed with it. But these two guys
Yeah.
brought me into the 12-step program, and that began my recovery journey.
Do you think that they knew that you were struggling, or, had you shared something up until
Oh
that
yeah.
point? Okay.
Yeah. I was in my sales job, I kind of saw my role as, my job was to go out and make friends, because people buy from those that they know, like, and trust. Right. So it was my job to go out and make friends. And I would tell them my stories about what happened over the weekend. I was 25 when I got sober. So I was probably 22 when I started this job. I was pretty young. And so I would be telling them these stories, and then they would share some of their stories and that they were sober. And I knew I did want to stop. I really did. And so I was fascinated with the things that they were telling me. And then they took me to my first meetings, and then they quickly handed me over to the women. And it was the women who loved me until I could love myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it really was. It was, because I desperately, I needed help. I really needed help. And I really did. I just wanted love. But I saw that I felt that love was going to come through a man. I thought falling in love, like the Cinderella way, was going to save me. But it was the women and I was terrified. Oh my gosh, I was terrified of the women.
What was terrifying about them? Yeah.
I did not have great relationships with women because I thought that it was love from a man that was going to save me. I saw women as competition. I never hung out with the girls. I mean, I grew up as kind of a tomboy. I always hung out with the boys. Women were competition. My mother would disown me on a regular basis because she had really strong high morals and values and stuff like that. And I was not behaving in a way that was aligned with her values, and she would regularly like disown me.
Wow.
So I learned that if you make mistakes or behave badly, that you will receive rejection, basically. She just didn't know how to, she didn't know how to handle me. She didn't receive any coping skills from her mother. So it's just like this lineage of, I had no coping skills. None of us had any coping skills. I didn't get any coping skills until I got sober. Like I just needed to, you know what I learned after I got sober?
What's that?
Emotion management.
That's a great skill.
I learned emotion management and recovery. Yeah. I learned that I was basically self-centered and self-seeking, and that I was at the cause, not at the effect. Had that victim mentality. And so when I learned to take responsibility for my feelings and really own it, oddly enough, when I first got sober, I read this book called A Course in Miracles, which sounds very religious, but it was very practical in the sense of it was a lot about cause and effect. And it talked about, everything boils down to either love or fear. And that was something I could relate to. And it just broke it down real simple for me, in that objects in and of themselves have no meaning. They have the meaning that we assign to it. And then it even extrapolated a little further to say that experiences have meaning that we assign to it. So as a child, when my mother would get angry and I would assign she doesn't love me, like that was the takeaway. That was my part. It wasn't that she didn't love me. She was actually mad at me because she loved me. Right. Like if she, like, what do they say, that like anger is not the opposite, or hate is not the opposite of love. Ambivalence is. When you have zero feeling about something, that's pretty far from love. Right. So it wasn't that, like, if I was doing things and she didn't care, like that would have been ambivalence, but she did care. She would get angry, but I assigned meaning to it. I assigned that I was the bad person. She didn't love me. I wasn't worthy. And from that place, that sense of really low sense of self-esteem, I made all my decisions from that place. Right. My decisions were like, I have to achieve to be worthy. Right. I needed to work hard. I needed to earn. I needed to display wealth. I needed to align myself with people who had a higher social status than I did, all that stuff was because I didn't believe I was good enough myself. And so a lot of my work in recovery has been to, and all of these things lie in our subconscious minds. All these beliefs that we have are in our subconscious mind. So now in the work that I do, it's a lot about identifying and reframing those subconscious beliefs so that we can feel like we deserve better. Because really, your outside world is a reflection of your inside world. So if you don't like what you see on the outside, that is an indication that you have a negative limiting belief about yourself.
That
And that
sounds
can absolutely be changed.
that sounds good. And I want to put a little bookmark there, and because I do want to get back to that. But I wondered if
Mhm.
you could go to the ladies, because it seems like that was like a
Mm.
pivotal point in your recovery. And up until this point, you had given up on the higher power thing. Like it wasn't doing anything for you. You asked for help several times and it wasn't fixing you. How did
Yeah.
you make that leap?
Well, truth be told, I was so beaten down by, like, obviously what I was doing wasn't working and I
Mhm.
was open to anything. I was like, I will do whatever you tell me to. If you say do it this way, I will totally do it this way. So I did it their way.
Okay.
And I had to reframe. They told me that I could change. Okay, let's just take the word God for a second.
Hmm.
If we just go back to that idea that words and objects only have the meaning that we assign to it,
Mhm.
then we can absolutely change the definition of that word God. I just use it because everyone's kind of on board. Like, okay, I get it.
Mhm.
It's like a power grade on yourself. Fine. But for me today, that I'm a little obsessed with quantum physics because it sort of explains everything that I learned in my childhood religion,
Mm.
right? It's like the laws of cause and effect and gravity, laws of attraction, the theory of entanglement. Actually, the theory of entanglement is based on Einstein's theory. You can Google this. I did not know that this was a thing. Spooky action from a distance. If you, I was like, someone told me
Mm.
that. I was like, come on, that doesn't sound like something Einstein would say. But yeah, look it up. It's actually so. But now they call it the theory of entanglement, and the idea is that two separate particles can be affected, even when there's like a space in between them. And that's almost
Interesting.
like the idea of when you pray for somebody, they receive an effect, right? So that's so it's like so interesting how science is explaining the quote unquote mystical or religious, or I don't even really what I'm talking about is just energy,
Right.
right? I'm just talking about energy because our bodies and everything that you see is made up of energy, positive and negative. And so we're just learning how to use energy and to our benefit instead of our destruction.
Yeah. And if you like quantum theory, you might like this book that I just started. It's called The Holographic Universe, The Revolutionary
Mm.
Theory of Reality.
Oh, I cannot wait.
Yeah.
We'll chat
we'll
after. I
chat
have to
we'll
write
chat
that down.
afterwards because I'm using it in my practice with some of my guys, and it's pretty cool. So
I'm obsessed with all that stuff.
uh-huh. All right.
Yeah. Alan Wolf is this he calls it the spirituality of quantum physics or something like that.
Mm.
It's so good.
So these women put you back on track. They loved you in a way that you just couldn't love yourself. So that's interesting. So then that's when you started to heal. That's when you started your healing journey.
The women I love these women
Hmm.
because I met this woman who remembered my name the second time she met me. Nobody ever remembers my name the first. I bet you get that too, because our names are so similar.
Yeah,
Arlina, Dina. I was like, we should start our own show and
we
confuse
should.
everyone.
We should.
But yeah, so this woman would meet with me, and I could see it in her eyes that she got my kind of crazy.
Hmm.
I would tell her stories and she was like, yeah, me too. Oh, check this out. And then she would tell me a story and it was like, whoa. And suddenly I was connected to another person,
Hmm.
and she didn't shame me. Brene Brown is a shame researcher, and she
Hmm.
talks about how empathy is the antidote to shame. And I had so much shame. I had so much that I was it presented as defensiveness, right? I was super defensive. And I was not able to, I was in denial. Had a very hard time looking at myself and seeing how I was at the cause of my life. But she presented so much. I could see it in her eyes that she understood. And there was something about her, like finally I felt heard and understood and loved. And she still, like at the end of the day, I told her all this horrible stuff. She still loved me. She's like, yeah, you're going to be okay. And it was just leveling. It was the leveling of my ego, right? To be, able to be vulnerable and transparent. And she didn't disown me. And I just needed that connection. It's like they say that alcoholism is a disease of isolation and connection is the cure. And she was able to connect with me through empathy. And it was magical for me. It brings tears to my eyes to this day because I was so alone. I was so desperately lonely and isolated. And finally, I was able to connect with another woman. And she helped me so much.
I love that.
Yeah.
One more thing, Air, before you go. The conversation with Arlina Allen continues next week, where we get into the theory and practice of her recovery. And I know in the intro, we talked about the writing exercise that you will find at the end of next week's episode. The interview is just so chocked full of good information that I wanted to extend the party. So we will get 2 weeks with Arlina Allen. And I hope that you stay tuned to finish the rest of the episode next week. Thanks, guys. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Atheists in Recovery podcast. For more great info and to stay up to date, head over to atheistsandrecovery.com.